TikTok, it's time to rock. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special episode here on the channel. We're here to celebrate a couple of things. More importantly, we're here to say hi to this guy. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Johnny. Also known as John Conklin, also known as Conks. How are you, brother?
I'm hanging in there. How are you doing?
Good to see you, bro. Good to see you.
See you.
We spent a couple of minutes in the green room having a bit of a chat. I'm sure we've got some people here in the chat that might want to say g'day to you. But we've got Keith Campbell, Holly, Charmaine. All the usual suspects are here saying hi. So depending on who jumps in the show, John, do you want to give people a bit of an update? You might have to do it a couple of times during the show. I've been receiving messages personally about your progress, and I know that you've been receiving some. How are you, brother?
I'm doing pretty well. I had, as a lot of people know, I had to have like emergency heart surgery about 2.5 weeks ago. But I went to a great place in Manhattan, in New York City here, and same place Bill Clinton had his done. So it's a good place. Highly recommend it. And just trying to bounce back. It's taking a little more time than I thought it would, but I guess any kind of major surgery like that takes a while. But other than that, I'm getting better every day. Feel a little bit better. Missed being on the show here with you guys.
Well, bro, certainly we have too, and a few other people, as I mentioned, have sent messages, asking how you were, and obviously missing your enthusiasm and your personality. I suppose the big thing for you, as far as the theme of the show goes, you were one of the main drivers behind EVH Con 7, and because of the situation you were in, you had to miss that. So I just want to do a special shout out before you talk about that and some of your thoughts about that to Jimmy V, who can't be here, who would normally be here. Jimmy is away with his band gigging. So, brother, we want to do a special shout out to Jimmy, not only because he's a co-host here and hangs out with us on these infrequent 5150 shows, but because he did a bloody good job setting up that laptop and getting everything filmed for the con, bro.
He did. I was pretty impressed with that, because for selfish reasons, because I was in a hospital room and on a Sunday, and I was like, watching football, and I figured, well, I'd like to see what's going on there too. So I was like, make sure you guys set that up in a good spot. So they took care of us there.
Yeah, they did well. They did really well, and and as Jimmy said last week when we were on, they've learnt some lessons for next year. Take our power lead so that we can stream the whole show. We were lucky that Janice Lala screened a little bit from her phone on the channel, so we appreciate that. But also Craig Staffco, being involved and lifting up the computer, so the iPad, so that we could get a better view. So and bro, that show's got a few views, over 1,000 views.
It's not bad, right?
Not bad for a small little channel that just gets together and talks, blows the breeze about music, bro.
Yeah, that's not bad at all, right?
We've got the rock professor in here, Simon Williams in here. G'day, how are you, Simon? Good to see you. We're going to see Simon later. We've got the ranking of the tracks later on with another guest that used to be on with us years ago, John, a guy called Carl. So we're going to be talking about the first 7 tracks on Rolling Stones' Stripped album that came out in 94, 95. Yeah. So we look forward to that.
Excellent.
Incidentally, hold on. I'm going completely off topic. Hold on for a second. See this cover? This cover here?
Can you show
So this
that, Andrew?
cover.
Are you allowed to show it?
So Facebook have deemed this cover um, adult themes and sexual activity.
The zipper's not even down. I don't know what they're talking about.
You know, but the weird thing about all this is that, you know, you can but they allow all this other stuff on Facebook.
Of course. I know. Bizarre, right? Bizarre.
Guys, we're also waiting for Hoss to come on. We spoke to Hoss a couple of days ago to let him know that we were going live to talk about this particular subject. He said that he would be available, so we've sent him the link. I've been sending him some messages, so hopefully Hoss is going to be able to jump on. If he doesn't, I'm sure John and I will at least keep you guys amused for a little while anyway, John.
We'll try.
We'll try. Okay, bro, so I suppose the thing is, one of the great things about social media, you can jump on social media when you get up in the morning and have your morning coffee, and there's always posts about something. So somebody posted somewhere about this VHS, you know, this DVD when it came out 30 odd years ago. And, you know, one of the great things about that is that you can sit back, John, and you can get just nostalgic and think back about, my gosh, that was 35 years ago or 32 years ago, John. So,
yeah.
You got thoughts on that? Have you got thoughts on the speed that time travels?
Yeah, it is crazy. I can't believe, you know, it's that long ago already. You know what I mean? It's just like, you know, a year seems like 6 months as we age. You know what I mean? As the older you get, and you know, after 50 years old, when I turn 50, a year goes by in 6 months. It feels like it just flies by, and then you look back and 36 years ago or whatever this, you know, when this was released, it's crazy. And you know, there's certain things about it that I remember vividly because I've been to the New Haven Coliseum. It's not really that far. It's about 2 hours from where I am in Connecticut. I'm in New York, and so I've seen concerts there before. I always hated that place. I always thought it was a terrible place. So I sent you some pictures here. So if you guys look at these pictures here, the parking garage was on the roof there on the left. That's the parking garage. The arena is underneath it. And this is just like on the right hand. Yeah, you can see where you had to drive up around that circle all the way up to the top to get into the parking garage. But underneath it is the arena. They've since demolished the place. But I just remember it being like, there were bad sight lines in it. There was very steep seating. I mean, it literally, it was like a wall of seats that went up, like it looked like a mile high on either side. And even in the video, you could see it. You can kind of see like there's these kind of pillars on either side of the stage, concrete pillars. And I just thought it was a horrible place for a show. And I always wondered why they filmed that, you know, there. I remember being there like the following year, and I'm like, why did they choose this place? But you know, I also learned that like Pat Benatar, she did a live concert video, and they filmed it at the New Haven Coliseum as well. So maybe there's a reason why they, you know, for camera, you know, angles and things, maybe it was good. But I just thought that place is always a horrible place, you know. So I didn't go see Van Halen there on the 5150 tour because they were in the New York area about 3 weeks earlier, and they played, I think it was 4 nights at the Meadowlands, and I went to either 3 or all 4 of those nights. I'm trying to remember. For some reason, I think I went to 3 out of the 4 nights there. But you know, at that point, the tour started March 27th in Shreveport, and we're talking now, you know, in August. They were as tight as could be at that point, because I remember them being incredibly tight when I saw them in New Jersey at the Meadowlands on the, you know, those 4 nights they played there. They were on, and they were, you know, they weren't burnt out yet from the road. It didn't seem. They still had that, you know, new car smell, I guess you could call it. And so that's one thing that stuck with me. And but you know, and obviously, you know, most people know they were filming both nights of that at 2 nights at New Haven. but the first night, I know Eddie was having problems with his wireless, and it kept cutting out throughout the show. And I guess it was a lot of the footage was unusable. It has popped up since then. Some of the footage, I think they did a video for like "Why Can't This Be Love" with the studio track as the audio, and they just used clips. I think it was from the first night of the band. I think that was there, and a few other places. I remember seeing it. You could tell it wasn't the same night, but it. I think it was as far as live shows go, we all know the live album with Dave they did was really untouched, and it's got all the warts are all there and everything like that. Well, this was, it wasn't a live album. It was obviously a VHS or DVD, but this was as live as it could get too. I don't think they went back in and into the studio and overdubbed anything on that. And, Don Landy mixed it and recorded it, mixed it. So, it was their guy that did it. But if you listen to it, it's pretty raw. You can hear it like that, but it just has a magic to it, as we all know. It's legendary.
Oh, and for a lot of reasons, and we'll talk about that during the course of the show. And obviously, if you guys and girls in the chat have your reasons why you think it's legendary too, please offer them, because that's what we're here for. What I did, bro, over the last couple of days, I've got I bought this CD a couple of years ago, which is the CD recording of this.
Uh-huh.
That I keep in my vehicle, and I was listening to that. And one thing that I noticed immediately when I was listening to it, it's you hear something differently when you're just hearing it as opposed to watching and hearing something at the same time. So the fact that you said there is a raw aspect about this recording, this film, I have to fully agree with you, and it bears its fruits more for me, especially when you just listen to the recording. You listen to the recording, you can hear, and there's no mistakes. Like obvious mistakes. But as John said, if you want to hear a band playing with enthusiasm and that vibrancy coming through the music and that rawness, boy, go and listen to it without watching the film, and you'll get a different sense of it, I'm sure.
Yeah, and when you listen to just the audio on it, it's not like it's overly compressed, and like Don Landy went back in and put lots of delays and reverbs on everything like that. It's pretty authentic to a live kind of sound there. All of it. You know what I mean? It's just the mix, everything was it's pretty impressive when you think of it about it that way. I watched it the other day, the whole thing. I just sat and because I hadn't watched it in so long, and it was just like, wow, it was just, after not watching it, it was kind of cool to sit down and watch it. So, I mean, if anybody gets a chance, try to sit and watch the whole thing all the way through. It's pretty impressive, when you go back.
Yeah. So obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to offer anything new in regards to this wonderful recording or film that we're talking about. We're just going to probably talk about a lot of the things that we've all been talking about for years and years. And I, from a personal point of view, I think this is just more of a celebration. The anniversaries are important, especially as you get older, because you want to sort of look back and reminisce, John, don't you? On these great things, on this great music. There's a couple of things that I want to sort of ask John and you guys in the chat as well for your opinions. But there is one question though, John. Fruitcake Tony asked: Did this arena, did it ever host the sports team before we actually fully get into discussing the DVD that you know of?
Yeah, I don't. It wasn't any like major sport team. I don't remember being there. I know like Hartford, Connecticut, which is the other major city like that in Connecticut, had like the Whalers, which were a hockey team. But I don't think there was any major professional teams in New Haven, not that I know of. But I had seen it set up, like photos of it with for sports, either hockey or basketball or things like that. But nothing like no major type of sporting teams in there, I don't think.
Okay. Well,
quite a lot of concerts were in there. I know Van Halen played there on the Women and Children First tour with the band Kix. I think opened for them there in 1980, and then I know on Diver Down they played there. On 1984 they played there. There's like a lot of the photos. There was like a photo session there before the show, and you've seen it. Like Eddie was wearing like a cut off leather jacket, and
yes.
yeah, it was. And a lot of those photos were from the New Haven show there. And then, but I couldn't find any evidence that after 5150 that they ever played there again. I don't think they on OU812 or anything after that they played there. I know they'd hit Hartford. I'd seen them in Hartford on For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, but I hadn't seen them in New Haven at all.
Okay, all right. So I've got a couple of questions that I want to fire to you guys. So if you guys haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do. If you're watching a replay and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our channel. I'll go back and I'll subscribe to all subscriptions. We share our subscriptions here on this channel. If you want to build your own channel, we'll subscribe back, I promise. And also, I'll wait for a little bit longer before we do a bit of a shout out. We've got 10 people watching. Thank you for hanging out with us. And a couple of other things too. On the channel, and I'll include some links here if you're watching on a replay, we've discussed this film a few times. In fact, John, I think a year ago we did a ranking of the tracks on this over a couple of episodes, so we'll put those links here if you want to go back and hear what we thought about these tracks with a couple of other personalities. That'll be great. Let us know what you think. But John, did you know anything about this before it came out? Was there a media campaign that the Van Halen band were going to do something like this? Was that something that you were aware of, that you heard in the pipeline, that this was something that was going to happen?
Yeah, I don't recall hearing, and times were different obviously back then. You didn't have any, social media or internet or anything, but I don't remember knowing anything about it, that they were filming it or anything that, other people, maybe they remember, they maybe saw a blurb in a rock magazine or so, and even in the local newspaper saying they were filming it or that night or something. But I was surprised when I saw in November, when I saw the, advertisements for it. I think I sent you a picture of like one of the advertisements for it there, but that was, I think we were all kind of surprised, you know what I mean? That was that quick too. The tour, was basically just ended and it was out pretty much right away. So, which was kind of a surprise. You figured they would have waited, 6 months later or something, but they didn't.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So, things were obviously a little bit different 30 years ago. So there was no media campaign before the event, which is obviously something that a lot of bands and artists do now, don't they? They build up, and they're dropping a lot of links on social media because obviously it has a big connection, organic connection now with the final event when it's staged. So yeah, that's interesting. So I think that's a point that we need to understand. The management, the band themselves, obviously, John, decided that they were going to do this.
Yeah, it's and obviously we're glad when you think about it, because they weren't very smart with the way they did things, Van Halen, because there's no, they didn't film the 1984 tour. How could you have not have filmed that tour? How can there not be anything existing of that? It boggles my mind. I look at all the Led Zeppelin stuff that's out there, pro shot Led Zeppelin stuff. It's just amazing. And how there's absolutely none of Van Halen. And it's just terrible. That like you would have figured the 1984 tour, they were like the biggest thing in the country that year, and that they would have filmed it then. So in one way, this was the first time people had ever really gotten to see Eddie Van Halen. If you didn't go to the concert, this video was the first time you ever saw. You'd heard about him, you'd heard the records, but if you hadn't gone to see them live, this is the first opportunity. A lot of people that had to see him play, like the solo section on this, which is incredible. You know what I mean? So, all those years people waited, we're curious about him and, how does he do that? What he's doing? Well, this is the first time we got to see that. And, a lot of people regret that it wasn't with David Lee Roth, but I mean, I have to say, I'd seen them with David Lee Roth and I'd seen them obviously with Sammy. This was the first time, but they, you could just, the energy was just unbelievable. It was just, you could feel it, you know what I mean? That they were firing on all cylinders. And, I never felt it that way with Sammy after that tour. It kind of settled in after that, but that was a very special tour, that 5150 tour.
Yeah. And look, I agree with you. I agree with you, John. I think one of the interesting things, and Fruitcake Tony's saying that he never heard of anything before this concert, and we've got G. Buchoff in here. Good to see you, brother. It's been a long, long time. Thank you for joining the stream. He got a copy shipped to him from the States, and it was unplayable, a VHS copy. So, that would have been disappointing. But I think the thing is, isn't it interesting that the Van Halens didn't film 84? 2 years later, 85, 86, 87, they realised the importance of film. Do you think, John, without sort of giving too much grief to the Van Halen management at the time of 84, but do you think back then, the rock and roll industry didn't realise the power of filming a concert and what that could do and how that could enhance the band, and more importantly, the money that they could make off a film? Do you think that was perhaps a reason why 84 didn't get filmed?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd have to point towards the manager, Ed Loeffler. I mean, I think he was a pretty smart guy. Obviously, he managed the Carpenters, and they had a huge following and all over the world. So I think he had maybe a larger view of the whole thing, like you're saying. And obviously MTV was about 5 years old at that point, but I think Van Halen maybe learned too from the videos they had from the 1984 album. Wow, sure. This is that helped drive the sales of the album too. You know what I mean? So I think somebody got it. You know what I mean? I'd have to look at the manager and he probably said, "Hey, we got to document this. Let's film it and see what we get." So.
And again, this question is to everybody in the chat. So when did you first hear about the VHS? Can you share with us your experience and that whole history of you discovering this VHS, please?
So myself, I worked in a record store. So I did get wind that it was coming out. I'm sure that's how I learned about it. And sure. So obviously we waited till it was released, and as far as I remember, I had it the first day it was out, of course, but that's how I ultimately found out about it. But I mean, everybody else back then, it was just such a different time that everything was really word of mouth. You know what I mean? You call somebody up and say, "Hey, did you know they got a concert video coming out?" And then we started to see, I remember looking billboard sometimes. I would look in, because we used to have billboard at the record store, and you could see advertisements for what was coming up. You knew when a new record or something was coming out. And I'm pretty sure in billboard there was an advertisement for the video in there too, that this was imminent, that it was going to be released. But it was totally a different time, so it's crazy how, nowadays things are so different, it's just, it's there, right? You just turn on your phone and everything is right there, The world,
I agree. We're spoiled, aren't we?
Yeah. The world got a lot smaller, But,
yeah, I think I was a little bit like you too. I distinctly remember getting an invitation from one of my workmates that he had this VHS, and I think for me that was the first time I heard about this. In the past, a lot of the new releases that I had heard had been because I'd been in the record shop. You see the posters, or I knew a couple of the guys that worked there, so they would obviously, John, like yourself and Simon, who worked in a record shop, let people know, hey, there's a new album being dropped by the Stones in a couple of weeks or something like that. But I'm pretty sure that I only found out about this through a friend of mine, and he organised that we're all going to go to his place, watch the VHS. There was a few of us, and we were going to have a few beers and watch this VHS. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't care. I didn't care that it wasn't David Lee Roth. I was aware of 5150. I'd been listening to the album. I'd fallen in love with 5150. So Sammy as the replacement John for me was a perfect fit for the band. So the only thing that I was really seriously interested in was watching Eddie play.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I think that was really the first time that the masses got really to see what this guy was up to and, what he was doing, you know what I mean? And, aside from it not being David Lee Roth, a lot of people would have preferred it to have been, maybe the 1984 tour. But I think that they were just happier and just maybe even healthier on this tour than they were on that one. They looked a little bit healthier, but, but you could just see it was you could see just that they enjoyed playing again, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like a drag, on them, you know what I mean? And you could tell there wasn't anything going on in the background that was, distracting them. So it was pretty evident on this, And that New Haven Coliseum wasn't even a very big building. It was only about 11 or 12,000, if I remember. And that's like, Madison Square Garden is like 18 or more 1,000. And even the average arenas here in the States are like 15, 16 or more, So this was a smaller place too, which, I believe it was only 11, or I think Sammy mentions 12,000, but I don't even think it was 12,000. It was smaller. It was just a very bizarre. I don't know if anybody in the chat has been there, but it was just very bizarre. I don't know if I sent you one of the pictures where the arena is kind of empty, but you can look and you can see how steep it was. It was just, I remember it just went up like, it was like one section and then it just went up for like a mile on the sides of the arena. I don't know if I sent you that picture. It was a black and white shot.
No, I'll have a look for that and put that in the chat. But I've heard a couple of theories over the years why this is so great, and one of the reasons is because of that intimate. Even though as John said, 8 to 10 to 12,000 people, can you call that intimate? Intimate. But when you consider the capacity of other arenas that the Van Halen band was playing in at that same time, certainly it was. And we all know, don't we, from rock and roll history, that sometimes a band likes playing in a smaller arena because it gives them that closeness, that connection, John, with the audience. Do you think that was one of the reasons why this film footage is so good, because it's got that connection?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely. That's why I wondered if that's why they chose that place. And like I said, Pat Benatar, they used it. I wonder if there was just like a vibe as far as filming live shows there. Maybe they could have more camera angles and things like that too, because of the way it was set up. I don't know. It'd be interesting, to find that out. Like I had mentioned to you earlier, so the director of this, he did a lot of work for, Warner Brothers acts and stuff like that, filming their concerts back at the time. He went on in I think starting in 1991, he did all the James Bond movies, the introductions at the beginning, the graphics and all that stuff. So that was his claim to fame after that. But I'd like to know if there was any kind of reason. I don't know if we could ever find that out, of why that place was chosen. Maybe it was just worked out that way because it was towards the end of the tour. They were at their peak, really. You know what I mean? So maybe they just said, hey, let's capture this now while we're, while we're where we are at the peak, So maybe that had something to do with it also.
Yeah. I'm going to do a quick shout out. We've got a few people in here, John, now. So just give me a couple of seconds, please. We've got Holly Lewis, a very, very good friend of the channel. Good to see you, Holly. Williams, Mr. Williams, Simon Williams, also known as the Rock Professor. Good to see you, brother. Thank you for hanging out with us. G. Buchoff, we've already mentioned you. Good to see you again. Robert Ranford is saying hi to you, John, saying, it's good to see you. Good to see you back. So thank you, Robert. Very, very good friend of the channel. Good to see you, brother. Gretch Zeppelin, thank you, brother. Another great friend of the channel. Who else did I see here? Janice Lala, who got mentioned in dispatches earlier at the top of the show for filming for us during EVH Con. Thank you, Janice. You're wonderful for doing that. Nelson Rodriguez, another very good friend of the channel. Joe Okapinti from Australia. Good to see you, Joe. Thank you for hanging out with us. Fruitcake Tony, go and see Fruitcake Tony. Go and subscribe to his channel, guys. He's doing some things over there on his channel as well. Give him a sub. We got Facebook user. I don't know who that is. Richard Poole from the UK. Thank you, Richard. Good to see you. I think we've mentioned everybody. Like to do that. We like to do that. Charmaine Taylor. Thank you, Charmaine, from Australia as well. No, from the UK. Gosh, all these people, all these names. And obviously, there he is there, Keith Campbell. Good to see you, bro. I don't think Keith is here, because if Keith was here, he'd be writing. So he must be doing something. Guitar Man 45, good to see you, brother. We're going to carry on with the show, guys. We'll do another shout out later on. Thank you, guys, for hanging out with us. It's always a pleasure. I suppose the great thing, obviously, too, about this this film footage, John, is it's achieved cult status, hasn't it? For a lot of reasons, within Van Halen fans, even to the point now where I think diehard David Lee Roth fans on that side of the fence are recognizing this publication, well, this production for being something unique as well.
Yeah, I think that, the Eddie solo in this is the best recorded representation of his solo, 10, 15-minute long solo at any concert they've recorded or anything like that. I think this is just perfection. And I remember, like I was telling you before, when they did the Play It Loud at the Met. So when you were walking through there, you walk into a room and there was like, couches and little things that people could sit on the floor and project it onto the wall. They were projecting Eddie's solo in this. And I would just, I'd seen it a million times. So I really just wanted to look at people who maybe weren't necessarily Eddie fans, but just were sitting there in awe, just like sitting on the floor watching. It was kind of cool. That's what I was watching. I wasn't watching him play. I was watching their reaction to him playing. And just because it was so well shot and he was just so on fire, it was just like, it was just perfect. And, thankfully we have that to look back on, you know what I mean? So, what I wanted to bring up too, it's like, so there are some uncomfortable cuts in this concert here and there in a few spots, because it wasn't as exactly as the tour was. So that tour, they started out with You Really Got Me, which was a genius move, because any of the Dave fans that showed up with their arms crossed right away, as soon as they kicked in, the show kicked off with You Really Got Me, you kind of had them by the hook right there. And then the next song was A One Way to Rock. And obviously we know this video begins with that song. And if you didn't know any better, you would have thought that's how the show started. Correct. With One Way to Rock, because it was just amazing. That's like incredible. They made that song a Van Halen song. You know what I mean? It's not, it's not a Sammy Hagar song. When I hear like that, it's just like, that's like a Van Halen song at that point. So, but there's a lot of things in the show that, were edited. like, in the chat, if you guys, you'll know some more. Obviously, they left out Good Enough. They left out Dreams. So, but so let's talk about that a little bit. They when like Dreams, I remember on that tour that it just sounded very thin live because there was no guitar in it. It was just Mike on the bass, Eddie playing the keyboard, and Alex playing the drum. And so there was just no. Eddie switched to the guitar solo. He played it on the guitar. He had his guitar on, but it was just. But then there was no piano backing. It was just Mike's bass. And as we know, bass in arenas doesn't really travel well. So I could see that that's probably the reason. It just did not translate very well live. And I also, it's so funny, certain things stick out of my mind. They did this a completely different intro to Dreams. And it's so funny because Andrew, when you were coming on, I'm sitting here in front of the piano and it was completely different. And I remember it distinctly from there. And it was like, I don't know if you can hear this.
We can hear it.
Something like this, and then it goes, wait. And Sammy was saying, the song is about love and hopes and dreams, And then it went, see, like dreams, Yeah. And then, that's how that, but I distinctly remember, I memorized that at the show that night. And I'd love to find like a bootleg of Dreams from that show. I'm sure they're out there somewhere because I was thinking about that today. It's like, after all these years, I just took that in. And that was one thing that always stuck out to me. But I think that's why they didn't put it on the video, because it just sounded thin without it didn't sound as full. Because in the arena, it just didn't carry without the guitar and it throughout the song. And another part that we all know is he started the guitar solo completely differently. We all know he played Fear Release, which I'm sure is in the public domain. So, I mean, maybe they didn't put You Really Got Me on there because they said, listen, it's a Dave song. We don't want any comparisons. Either that, or maybe they didn't want to pay any royalties to Ray Davies or Dave Davies. You never know. But I remember he would start out his solo with it's another thing that if I had a guitar here, I'd play it, but it was like an A minor, G to F type of thing, very minor key sounding thing. And he played that. It was like and it was like A minor, G, and like F. And then he would go into Fear Release. And then after that, then he'd go into 316. But 316 was like a blues jam. He started it out the same way, which is him. Then Alex would kick in, and in the chat, you guys might remember. I'm sure Keith will remember. I think Mike was even playing bass sometimes on that little blues jam when in 316, because Eddie would start to solo, and but it was a longer version of 316, but it was a total like a blues jam. And then he'd go back into his regular solo. So I'm sure they have all of this stuff on film. And, but these are just some things that stuck out in my head, because you can see the cut in the editing when he's doing he starts his solo. You could see where it cuts in after Fear Release, Yeah. So, but that's the opening that he did to Fear Release. I don't think Beethoven did that on any Fear Release on any CD of Beethoven that I have. You don't hear that A minor, it's like da na na da 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 da. It's like so. But I love that thing too, because that stuck in my head that night too. And it was like, I remembered that, when I went home, I remember grabbing my guitar like 1:30 in the morning, trying to remember, figure out the chords so I'd remember it. But
Wow.
yeah, but so there was a lot of things like that, that in the video, I would almost love to see it put back together and cleaned up and re-released in 4K or whatever with, completely untouched as the concert happened. Wouldn't that be cool?
So we got 22 people watching. Thank you very much for hanging out with John and I and everybody else in the chat. We're all a family here. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. I'm glad you said that, John. And it's one thing I suppose we're going to always keep saying, aren't we? I'm going to share something with you guys. So yesterday I was mowing the lawn, and I had my earbuds in over my earmuffs. And John, I was listening to the 30th anniversary release or something, 30-something release of The Cure's album High, that came out 91, 92, around there. And I was listening to that, and it's got, John, all the songs attached to it, you know, the songs that they did in the studio, the studio versions, the demo versions, everything. They're coming out with the film, John, because these bands, these record companies, these managers realize now, 30 years later or 20 years later, that if there was a song that didn't quite fill the arena because the bass was taking up so much space, back in the day I could understand why they wouldn't include that in the film, in the publication, in the recording. But
Right.
today, now, you know, other bands, other acts, John, are doing this. They're giving you these accidental mistakes or these cock-ups for the fans to sit back and listen to. And I just can't, for the life of me, understand why we don't get that from this band.
Well, I had thought by now, by this fall, I was confident that we would have heard something, because there's certain things that could be done without Alex having to lift a finger. The remastering of the Sammy era albums, although, you know, Sammy said recently that he understands they are doing it, and they will find that song. He said that was completed between us two. He goes, it's done. They will find it. So, and he did. So somebody must have told him that they're doing that. He did say that. It only makes complete sense. It's like, you know, it's just like printing money, Alex. I don't, you know, understand. It's like, you know, I understand that Eddie and Alex, I really believe one of the reasons that they didn't ever remaster the Sammy albums is because they didn't want him to get any money. They were just like, yeah, I think that's how angry they were at him. They didn't want him making any money off anything as possible. But, you know, I really think that was part of the whole thing. But listen, at this point, it's like, you know, it's time, obviously, for that, you know, to give your fans what they want. You know what I mean? It's not even telling you to go in the studio and go through the tapes. You could do this easily. You know, it doesn't take much to do. And the same thing with this video, to go back in there and remaster this video, you know, in, you know, Dolby, whatever, the Atmos or whatever you want to do it now. And, you know, it would be simple to do, and it would, you know, and they could make a lot of money off of it. I think all of the hardcore fans would go out because there's so little video of Van Halen exists. So, you know.
So, well, I've got a question for you, and we touched on it last week with when Jimmy was on the channel, John. And obviously, I want to open this question to everybody else in the chat too. So we're all friends here with Chris Gill. And, you know, he was at EVH Con, and we know that he's reached out. He came on the channel, and he, you know, spent 6 hours with us when we were celebrating the anniversary of Eddie's passing, the 2nd anniversary here on the channel. Spent the whole stream with us and told us a couple of things. If you guys haven't checked that out, please do, because there are some gems that Chris shared with us on that stream, well worth checking out. One of the things that he shared with us is that, you know, he's now got a relationship with Wolfgang, you know, that's developed over since the publication of his book that he did with Brad. And he spent some time now talking with Wolfgang and with Matt Bruck. So how do you think Chris Gill will act as a conduit now, because he hangs out with Van Halen fans? He's hearing what organic fans are saying and wanting. And he realizes now, because he said it with us, that he has this responsibility between, you know, the artists and the artist, and the fans. He sees that. He's humble about it, but clearly sees himself being in this circuit. How important do you think he's going to be in influencing Wolfgang and the Van Halens in the near future and getting the stuff out?
I just think Chris is just a huge asset to them. I think, he's known Matt for a long time, probably almost 25, 30 years now. He's known Matt Brooks since at least 1994. So I think that, I think those guys are very careful of people trying to cash in and make money off Eddie's name. Anybody, writing any kind of books and things like that. I think they kind of frown upon that, which I understand. You know what I mean? They're very protective. And, but I think that they know from, I think they know, right, exactly. I think they know from Chris and Brad's book that, like I said, there was nothing, that was just all good. And it was all positive, Eddie stuff in there. It wasn't, trying to take him down or make him look bad or, embarrass or anything like that. So I think that they realize that Chris is a huge asset to have on your side. He's incredibly knowledgeable. He's a protector of the flame, Eddie Van Halen, the legend. He wants to promote it. He wants people to know how important Eddie was, in the musical, world. And he wants to extend that to the future so other people know that, you know what I mean? And I think that they see that. And so in so many ways, I think Chris is just such a huge asset for them to have and to help them, I'm sure whatever they would want to do, he would, be involved. He's such a knowledgeable guy. So there's nobody better to have on your team than Chris Gill when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, and I agree. And everybody here knows Alan Garber very, very well, and Alan Garber has a very, very close relationship with Chris Gill too. And Chris mentioned this too on our live stream. So I'm not speaking out of house here when I say this. So if you guys are familiar with Jimmy Page's anthology that came out a couple of years ago, there's a lot of photos with guitars and gear and, photos from concerts, and there's articles, not articles, there's a story there about each photograph. And again, on this Clapton book here, Six String Heroes, a lot of this material was written by Chris as a result of, give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen, as a result of, hold on, another publication that Chris was involved in, which is Eric Clapton's Guitars, the Christie's catalogue, which has got photographs and a lot of the backstory of the guitars. Now, what's really interesting for us as Van Halen fans is that Chris Gill is going to be doing something like this. He's going to be giving us, that critical record of guitars and gear from a guy that knows the guitars, knows the gear. We certainly look forward to that, don't we, John?
I hope it happens. I'm praying that it happens because, Chris is so good at what he does. He had, he's been obviously, like we said, since '94, he's been, doing the writing for Guitar World about Ed. So, a lot of stuff that we've learned over the years is because of Chris, you know what I mean? So there's just nobody better to have on your team than that guy. So I look forward to it. You know what I mean? I look forward to him being involved, and I'm hoping that's, it really comes to fruition because they could do some great things.
Yeah, and thank you, G, for the kind words. Thank you. And I got to agree with what Holly's saying there too. A a documentarian, absolutely. The eye for detail that Chris has. And, we saw a glimpse of it from the first article that he provided us a few years back. John, guitar aficionado. Did I pronounce that right?
Aficionado.
Aficionado. Aficionado. Okay. But we saw that too. And again, what's really important to us Van Halen fans is the eye for detail that Chris will have. He's going to get the pickups right, isn't he? He's going to get the tuners right. So if he's going to be talking about a guitar in that detail, he's going to get that pretty much as correct as anyone can, as opposed to some hack who's just going to say, well, Eddie just had a guitar and it was a Les Paul.
It's like a forensic investigation. When you sit with, on one of these shows with Chris and some of these other guys, Johnny B. When they talk about like the Frankenstein guitars and stuff like that, it's like, it's incredible listening to him. And even when they hypothesize about certain things, you know what I mean? About the helmet, with the stripes on the helmet, it's just like, it's incredible how, and it all, drops it all into like a timeline. And it's just like, it's amazing how, how far these guys go. They're like, Chris is just, it's incredible. So it is like a forensic investigation. You know what I mean? He just goes back and picks things apart, to find this. And he knows so much about, like the Frankenstein and these other guitars. It's just like, like I said, it's just great to have him on your team. You know what I mean? And I think they realize that. I think Matt Bruck and Wolfgang realize that.
Yeah, and obviously, too, another point, too, that we need to share and remind each other of, too. It's the organic fans through social media and the eye that they have and the information that they have that they can pass on. Chris is certainly open to that. He's certainly one of those authors who's happy to make those connections. And I've seen this recently with a reprint here of this Peter Green biography by Martin Clemens. Originally, it came out in '95, John. So this got printed again this year in celebration of, Peter's passing a couple of years ago. But in the introduction, the author talks about 5 or 6 people that he met through social media, through various Peter Green Facebook groups on social media, and the information that they've given him. And he's incorporated that in the story to give that attention to detail, John. That he wouldn't have necessarily picked up or had in the first place.
No, that's right. And to the guy like Matt Bruck's credit, he's running a business. Wolfgang is doing his own thing. You know what I mean? So I think that they see in Chris Gill, like, hey, this guy, he's so full of knowledge. He probably knows, maybe more than they know, than Bruck would know about, the history of the Frankenstein. He may say, hey, Chris, let me ask you a question, blah, 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 because, he was he was running the company and stuff like that. So it's just like, it's just to have somebody like that, like you said, the internet's a great thing sometimes too, because you have so many people that know so many things that, it's incredible the knowledge you can find out about things that we never, would know otherwise. So I just think it's all good. And I can't wait to see what comes out of Chris, hopefully working with these guys.
Yeah. And we wish him all the success, that he can do. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to remind you about this. He's mentioned it a couple of times on our channel that he takes that position very seriously. He takes it very, very seriously, that he's a conduit between us as the fans, and the artists, and that responsibility. And, that's to be commended because, clearly he wants to work with us, and we're going to be doing our Christmas show next month. We're going to stream for 6 hours, take in 3 or 4 different time zones, and we'll ask Chris to come on and spend some time with us. And, he might want to share some of his research at that time, John, And that's the good thing about Chris too, is he's fully approachable. I've spoken to a couple of people through messages that they were just blown away with the conversations that they were having with him at EVH Con, including this man here, Keith Campbell. Keith Campbell had a great conversation with him. So
yeah,
and Janice, he was open to everybody.
Yeah, any conversation anybody has with Chris is always he's just an interesting guy. Aside from Van Halen, you talk to him about anything. Talk to him about whiskey, scotch. He's just a knowledgeable guy. He's just great to have a conversation with. And on top of it, he's a protector of the legacy of Eddie Van Halen. So, we're lucky that we have him.
Yeah. Oh, there's one other little sort of tangent that I want to share with you guys too. As far as eye for detail goes with instruments and bands. Last weekend we were very, very fortunate and lucky to have John from the Red Special podcast join us. And a couple of weeks before that on his channel, he was very, very fortunate enough to have Brian May come on and spend an hour and a half talking with him. And one of the things that became aware to me, John, during the course of this interview is that John was mentioning the Bohemian Rhapsody film and how they had to have the Red Special correct for the 70s and correct for the 80s, because the Red Special, for example, that he played at Live Aid was very different compared to the one that he was playing in the 70s. That I wouldn't, as a Brian May Queen fan with my limited amount of knowledge, pick up. I wouldn't pick up the fact that the tuners were different and there was something wrong, somewhere else on the guitar. But a real fan would. So to offer that authenticity, John, they went and saw experts, fans, to get that perspective. So, what do you think? Is this right? So the producers were doing that. So I just love that, John.
I agree 100%. I mean, you're going to do it right,
Well, certainly as best as you can. The worst case scenario, and we've seen it before with other videos. Some producer, some director could have had him up there with a Stratocaster,
right,
playing. And then we would have gone, oh my God.
Right, exactly. Well, it loses all credibility right there. You know what I mean? And the people you really, obviously you want to appeal to a wide audience, but if you lose the hardcore fans in any of this stuff, it's over, I think. You know what I mean? You have to bring them in,
Well, I think the reason why they need to do that now, John, and everyone in the chat, the reason why they need to get the hardcore fans on board now is because the hardcore fans through social media can influence how well something goes commercially. It's so if you're getting something right and correct, and then a channel like ours, a channel like Fruitcake Tony's, can get together and say, well, look, this is great, this is good, this is the authenticity that we want. So that's going to give credibility, John, to the success of the commercial product.
Sure, because if they ever did anything with like an Eddie Van Halen film like that or whatever, that people would be coming to, all these hardcore people like us here in this chat saying, hey, did you see that movie? What do you think? And if we were like, they got it so much wrong from this, people aren't gonna. I'm not gonna go watch it. I'm not gonna go see it. Then it's just like it's look at those cheesy TV shows that they do. You know what I mean? How bad they're done when they try to reenact, the band breaking the band. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. But people will come, they'll call hardcore Van Halen fans and they'll say, what'd you think of that? Was it good? Is it, and you say, no, it's horrible. Forget it. Don't even waste your time, But so that's why it's good to build a good team like that. You know what I mean? For the future. And if Chris Gill is on your team, then that's a good team. You already got your Babe Ruth on the team right there.
Awesome. And while people are talking about Brian May and the Red Special in the chat, this might be an opportune time for me to mention this. You guys need to keep an eye on our channel, especially early next year, in regards to a special guest coming on, talking about a re-release of a recording that's very, very dear to our hearts that came out in the early 80s, the Starfleet project. So make sure that you hit those notification buttons. If you don't, we'll let you know anyway. The event of the season, as we like to call it. We're working on something really, really great for the channel, and we hope that we'll have a lot of people here celebrating that with us. We look forward to that.
Yeah, I mean that just the fact that Starfleet is being revisited and all the extra outtakes and all this stuff. I mean, this is just great. You know what I mean? This kind of stuff is just great.
Well, Brian May, let's just, again, use Brian May as an example, as a very, very good example with coming out. So they re-released, not Innuendo. What did they re-release last week? The Queen album. Someone go and have a look on Facebook for me, or on and tell me. They re-released it with all the outtakes, the demos, remastered it. Brian's doing that with his solo material, doing that because obviously it makes commercial sense, but also because he wants to have a legacy there, a history there of him.
The Miracle?
That's it. And the band that he was involved in, for the fans to say, here, this, John, this is it. This is everything that was around this album. Take it, give me the money, and go and listen to it and watch it.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's not going to damage the integrity of the original album when it came out by putting outtakes in for us now. It's just like, we've lived with the original album for years and years. We get it, but it's just like, now let's go look under the hood, you know what I mean, and see how this came about, So it's just a thank you for the fans. And when bands do that, we're not, as Van Halen fans, we're not used to that because we'd never gotten really anything. You know what I mean? It's just like, you'll get what we give you and you'll be happy. You know what I mean? That's the kind of thing. Okay. Thank you, but it's not the case with a lot of other bands. So I'm hoping that as time goes on and that they see fit to, throw us peasants a few crumbs here and there, remasters, a new song here or there, just that, something, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like a lot of us, we're kind of waiting for that. Keith Campbell's saying the session was only 2 days, April 22nd to the 23rd, 1983. And look, we don't mind going down different tangents on this show. But I'm going to tell you, Keith, in 1983, when I was a young fellow, that hit the news here. That was in guitar magazines. We were talking about that, Brian May and Eddie Van Halen getting together for this project when we were young guys, John. I don't know if you were, but we were talking, and it must have been good. This has got to be good because Queen in 83 were huge, so, and they went on to become huger and huger and hugerist. But the point is, Eddie and Brian, we're getting together to do this. Go and check out the Blues Breaker Jam. I know there are some Van Halen fans that have been on some shows that have said, Eddie couldn't really sort of play outside of anything that Eddie wrote. He was lost, I don't subscribe to that theory. I don't subscribe to that at all. I believe, Eddie was just as good doing an impromptu jam as maybe Stevie Ray Vaughan could have done. But that Blues Breaker Jam, John, to me anyway, indicates that, they were jamming, and that was a pretty good jam.
I agree. I mean, it's just like the whole music snobbery thing about that. It's just like, oh, you can't touch, Eddie can't play the blues, John Mayall. You know what? It sounded like fun. I enjoyed it listening to it. So what's the problem? You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't see the problem. You know what I mean? People are like too precious about certain things. You can't do this. You can't, no, you can't. Why can't you do that? It sounded good to me. It sounded like it was fun. I enjoyed listening to that. You know what I mean? The broken string and all. It's just like,
Yeah.
it was a bunch of guys in a room just jamming, having fun. What could be better than that? You know what I mean?
Says it all.
With guys with distinct personalities on their instrument. A lot of guys never have that. A singer's voice. If you have your own voice as an instrumentalist, and two guys who are undoubted, you cannot, or Brian May and Eddie Van Halen, their voices right away. Who's like, you hear one note and it's them. So you put those two guys in a room together. What could be bad about that? It's fun. Why do people take it so seriously? You know what I mean? It's a bunch of guys jamming, having fun, throwing back some beers, broken string, leave it in there. Let's, I don't see the problem with that. I don't understand why people get so like music snob about that. That's always why I always say I love Dave Grohl, because Dave Grohl is not a music snob. He'll play with anybody. He's in there with Rick Springfield. I mean, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, he doesn't care, and that's how it should be, So I love that kind of stuff, and I love the Starfleet, and you're talking about that date in April. That was a hugely busy time for Van Halen. They were becoming part of the public conscious at that point, which they never were. Even Van Halen 1, it sold millions of albums, but they weren't on. In '83, after Diver Down came out, you could feel it. You could feel that they were, I always say it's the public conscience. Grandma knew who Eddie Van Halen was. You know what I mean? Grandma knew who the jumps, the song. Everybody knew it at that point. It was just like, and they were red hot, and they were about to explode with 1984 being released the next year. They were on fire, and that April was a particularly busy time for them. Jump was recorded that was the first song they did for 1984. That was recorded in April of 93. So that was in the can probably when he went to jam with Brian May for those 2 days. At the same time, it was a month before the US Festival when they were putting that whole giant, Eddie even said how much of a hassle it was for one show. It was like preparing for a whole tour just to do that one show. So they had a lot of stuff going on right at that moment. And I just say that, every band has that moment in their career where they are, at the top of the parabola, and after that, it's kind of diminishing returns. So a lot of people don't like the Police. Like I always cite them. That was it. Sting knew it was like, it's only diminishing returns after this point. We're the biggest band in the world. We're playing at Shea Stadium, the Beatles Stadium. It's like, it doesn't get better than this. It's only going to go down from here. So he's like, I'm pulling the plug now. You know what I mean? So every band hits that. U2, all these bands hit that. And this was Van Halen's moment where they were hitting that point in their career. Now, luckily, some bands are able to ride the wave and make it last a long time. And Van Halen is one of those bands that were able to never to achieve that exact success that they had, but they were able to still stay high profile and remain relevant. And Van Halen did it up until, a lot of bands, like I always laugh at U2 because they tried to stay as relevant for as long. They would change their style of music. They would just try to like anything to ride that wave of relevance. But even, you can't maintain it forever. And at a certain point, you become a nostalgia act. It happened to the Stones. It happens to every band. It happened to Van Halen too. When they did the reunion with Sammy, basically it was just punching the clock, playing the old hits, shaking Dave's hand 5 minutes before the show, pretending you're friends for 2 hours, and then seeing them in the next city and doing it again, and making up for all the money that they made that they didn't make in the 80s that they should have made, and being bitter like bands like Bon Jovi were made like $250 million, Bon Jovi's worth $250 million, and they're the mighty Van Halen, and they didn't make anywhere near that money. So I think that whole last 20 years of Van Halen's career was them just saying, it's time to make up some of that lost money right now. And that's what they did, you know? And they made more in the last 20 years of their career than they made in the whole first, 30 years of it. So
look, and I agree with you. Thank you, Boner James, for the contribution to the channel. I before I jump on and add a little bit to what John's just said, I think it's really, really important that we focus on the first thing that John said. And one of the great things about, the re-release or the reissue of the Starfleet project, because it's about joining dots and connecting dots and doing a bit of archaeology. And John's provided that for you guys if you haven't picked it up. So while he's doing this jam, he's just put in the can jump. So put that into perspective. So when you go back now and listen to the Starfleet project and think about it and listen to it, just put that into perspective that they are working on 84 at the same time and just make that connection. That's why the Starfleet project, one of the reasons why listening to it it has a relevancy for Van Halen fans.
Definitely, without a doubt. And I don't know. I think I always loved the Starfleet. I thought the playing was like inspired on there. I just thought it was just fun. You know what I mean? And and a lot of the negativity that you hear about it from Clapton and people like that, it's just like, I mean, I don't subscribe to that at all, man. I just think it's just fun. You know what I mean? And why do people overanalyze everything like that? You know what I mean? It's a blues jam. It's just fun. You know what I mean? That the theme song Starfleet, I just think that's brilliant. You know what I mean? What they did with that. And I love hearing their individual personalities. When Brian May's playing, when Eddie's playing, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yep.
It doesn't get better than that. It's that you don't have to wonder, oh, is that Eddie there? Is that, no, that's Brian May and that's him. You know what I mean? So sure. I cannot wait to hear the outtakes and the extended version. Yep. And the remixed, remastered, where everything's going to be even clearer. It's going to be great,
Yeah, and stay tuned to this channel, ladies and gentlemen, because, we'll have a host of people on here talking about that. We'll be ranking those tracks. We'll be talking about it because, anything and everything that's going to be coming out that's attached to Eddie Van Halen, as scarce as it might be in the next coming period of time, we'll offer our opinions about it. And like I say, stay tuned because we might have, if everyone crosses their fingers correctly, we might have a key person sharing that with us here on this channel. So we do anticipate that coming through. But look, I agree with you. John, and I think a lot of people here in the chat too. Music is made to be heard, not to sit in a closet somewhere and remain within the sounds of silence. Even Eddie said something along those lines. Of course,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I think, again, folks, just remember this. We're talking about it along with a lot of other channels, a lot of other podcasts, a lot of other Instagram accounts and Facebook groups. A lot of people are talking about this. So sooner or later, that rattling, this murmuring, this white noise is going to filter back to the powers that are going to make these decisions. So keep repeating ourselves. Keep talking about it. Keep asking, because if we stop, it's definitely not going to happen.
Definitely. You're 100% right. But, so we were talking about, broken strings during, blues break. It's stuff like that. And how that would relate to something like Live Without a Net is because that night the audio was unusable. They had to only use the second night of that. And Eddie broke a string on the 5150 Kramer. And it's probably like one of the few times on the tour he did that. So he had to switch to the Steinberger mid song on that too. That it's just great. It's real. It's live. You know what I mean? Like Starfleet was. So I love all that kind of stuff. I like mistakes. I like, it doesn't need to be perfect. You know what I mean? That's the problem with music nowadays, is like, it's just so, auto-tuned and perfect, and it doesn't breathe. You know what I mean? So when you hear a mistake like that, I like it. You know what I mean? It's real. So
It's interesting that you should say that, because a couple of weeks ago I was talking to a very good friend of mine, and we were talking about rock and roll videos and concerts and stuff like that. And my friend, who's going to be on our show tonight, said, have you watched that part where Clapton just about drops Blackie when he's performing further up the road on the last waltz? And I said, yeah. And he catches it. He said, wouldn't it be great if he dropped it? And the band carries on playing, and he picks up his guitar and puts it on and and I said, yeah, because Scorsese would have probably just left that in.
Yeah, it's a real moment. It's real. You know what I mean? I don't know. I love that kind of stuff. I want it to be real. You know what I mean? Listen, I understand in a studio, you make it sound as good as possible, but we're lucky because, Van Halen, they left a lot of mistakes in on their albums. The later years with Sammy, Eddie was a little bit more, punch in and stuff like that. But I mean, talk about Diver Down for a second. That album is much maligned, and I blame a lot of that on Eddie because he talked a lot of crap about that album. But to me, that album is right up there as the most representative album of the original Van Halen as the first album is. There are less overdubs, I think, on Diver Down than there are maybe even on the first album. That album is just, they went in there and banged those songs out. I mean, you can hear guitars out of tune on the solo and Where Have All the Good Times Gone. I mean, I sat there and went through that whole album, and I'm like, there's not a lot of overdubs on that album. That was like, they went in there and just cranked that thing out and got it done. You know what I mean? And it's a great snapshot of them at the moment. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's why Greg Renoff always points to that album. He loves Diver Down. And it's for exactly those reasons too, because it's one of the most representative albums of live of how they were. There's not a lot of rhythm guitars overdubbed. It's just the bass over the solos. It's just a handful of overdubs on that whole thing. So it's just a great snapshot of where they were, you know what I mean, at the time. So
awesome. I just want to do a special shout out to a guy that's been on our show talking Eric Clapton guitars, Brody. Good to see you, brother. And we look forward to Brody. Brody's going to come on. We need to work a date out, but Brody's going to come on, and we're going to talk more Clapton stuff with Brody, guys. So we'll get that sorted, Brody. I appreciate you jumping on. If you guys haven't seen that show, go back on the channel. It's a couple of weeks back, and Brody shares with us his passion and love for guitars. But especially on that show, we're talking about Clapton guitars. So we look forward to that. Look, I agree with you. I think Diver Down, you're right. There is hardly any post-production on that. And that's a testament to the band at the time, because they were confident. They were confident in their ability to just get out there and do it. And do you think, though, John, at that time, at that sort of period, you got to remember this, 81, 82, 83, 84, bands were just producing stuff, and people weren't as sophisticated. They weren't like listening deliberately for some mistake that might be happening. They just wanted the album to put on the turntable, John. They just wanted to have fun, That was the crucial element back then.
I totally agree. It's just cool because in that 6-pack of Van Halen albums, it's like, you get an album like Diver Down, and then the follow-up album is an album that's a lot more time was put into it. So it's just like you get a little bit of the best of both worlds there. You get them banging an album out in 2 weeks live, and then you got one where they actually worked for like 6 months on and took their time. And, so it just showed you what kind of talent that Eddie really was. It was just like, I mean, some of that stuff he played on there is just like brilliant. And the fact that, some of those songs are just written I mean, most of them were written on the back of a bus or something like that. It's just like the output that they had. The first 6 albums was incredible. I mean, in the later years, he became more like, other bands where it takes a year to complete an album and things like that. But I mean, some of the stuff that he did just was like, and I think a lot of it is because he was rushed. I think that's where the brilliance comes in, because he didn't have a lot of time to just, sit and work stuff out. It was just like, that's why I think it's brilliant, because it's like, man, he just came up with that top of his head and just played that. It's just like, that's incredible. How much, how many of those songs, they'd say they'd rehearse a song 2 or 3 times. And if it wasn't working, they'd move on to another song. So it's like some of those things that he is on the final version of some of those songs, some of those licks he's playing were just literally off the top of his head. Some of those weren't even worked out. I don't think. It was just like, he was just in the moment, playing him and Alex and Mike or whatever. And so that's why I think part of the brilliance is, I think we're lucky in a way that that's how it was,
Yeah, well, what's the saying? How does the saying go? Capturing lightning in a bottle, lightning in a jar. So, certainly that's the component, and Brody, I think the band caught that, on this recording, this VHS, this film. They certainly caught lightning in a bottle with that, and here we are, 30 odd years later, still talking about it, how it's still significant for us, and how we often still go back and watch it. Eddie in those pink puff pants, with that belt, that he's wearing, that good friend of ours, Lewis from Fairfield Guitar Company, is got available on his website for people if they want to go and buy. I don't think he's got the pink puff pants, but and the singlet, the white singlet, that Eddie was wearing, and fantastic. Just a great recording.
It's amazing when you look back and see, compared to now, how primitive even things were back then. It's like, Alex, if you look on the stage there, he's got a PA as his monitors. If you look at the drum set, it's an actual PA aiming at him. I mean, that's why he's deaf, because it was just like, blasting out of that. I mean, I know Michael Anthony said he couldn't even stand up there or whatever, or Eddie too. It was just so loud. But it's just incredible, how far things have come with the in-ear monitors and stuff like that, that they could even hear themselves on the stage, and just to be so, the brilliance, it's incredible.
Okay, so I've got a question for all the cats in the chat here. So, stick your hands up if you wore pink puff pants, or at least puff pants, the style that Eddie had. I certainly know that some of us were wearing, maybe they were a little bit tighter, but we were certainly wearing puff pants that Don Johnson from Miami Vice was wearing around the same time. They weren't as baggy, but that was certainly the style back then, wasn't it, John?
It was. We had pants over here called jeans. They were called Cavaricis. I don't know if you guys had those. Remember Z Cavaricis? I know people in the chat had them, but they were kind of like puffy kind of jeans like that. And I remember it was like in the 1984 era, it was like we all had parachute pants. That was the big deal then, parachute pants. But then like 86, 88, it was the big, like the bodybuilders would wear them, the big puffy pants like that. Oh yeah, we all had those.
Yeah. And MC Hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
He was wearing them. So
yeah. And the white Reebok sneakers, yeah.
Yeah, I had the Reebok sneakers. Mine were ERSs, Energy Return Systems, ERSs, and they cost a fortune, bro.
Yeah,
a week's wages, bro. They weren't cheap.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah, those are the days, right?
So who's admitting to wearing pink pants? Or, well, not pink, but puff pants?
Everyone is in the chat. Robert Ranford went through the Reebok phase, but he didn't have the pants. Yeah, they were men's version of mom jeans. Yeah, right. Kind of. Yeah, you look back and cringe now when you see photos. I'm like, oof.
Oh yeah. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting though, you know, at my work, you know, there's a couple of young cats there, and you know, I never wore skinny jeans, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, you know, that I was way past wearing skinny jeans. But it's interesting listening to these guys, talking to these guys now, because skinny jeans are are so out now. All the young cats now are wearing baggy jeans. You know, baggy jeans are the fashion, and I'm going, well, I've been wearing baggy jeans for years, so
Yeah. Exactly.
even when they weren't in fashion, bro.
Exactly. Well,
Um,
that's the definition of classic, right? Classic is something that never goes out of style. So there you go.
oh, that's it, classic.
Classic.
So everybody's admitting it. Joe,
Yeah.
Robert Ramford's got a smile here, so that's admitting that he was wearing them too.
Yes.
Keith's even named them Zubas.
Yeah. And the pants and the mullet were the ultimate combo back then. You are right.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, look, we've been live for an hour and 27 minutes. We're going to wind up the show. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you, but more importantly, it's been a pleasure and a privilege catching up with our very, very good friend, John Conklin. I know that everybody here in the chat is happy to see him, and I know that a lot of people, when they go back and watch this show after, will be happy to see him too. So just keep John and his family, everybody, in your thoughts and in your prayers, because, you know, he's still got a bit of recuperation to go through, and you know, he's back, and I'm not sure when we're going to do another 5150 show, but John will definitely be back for our Christmas show. Definitely, 100%. He's going to be hanging out with us, and we'll talk a bit of, I'm sure, Van Halen on that show, won't we, John?
Always.
But we do. Let's while we're hoping and praying, let's hope and pray that maybe when we do this show next year, maybe this has come out in Blu-ray. Maybe
Nice.
they've released some extra material, John.
Yeah.
If,
Imagine
if
that.
yeah, if anybody from the Van Halen camp's watching this show, please pass on our regards to the Van Halens and ask them for. We'll take anything. We'll take all the outtakes. We'll take everything. Anything you guys have got.
That would be great, wouldn't it? I mean, something's got to give at some point, you know. I know it's, everything's, dependent on Alex. Everything's going to be up to him, anything Van Halen wise. I don't even think it's really Wolfgang. I think it's all Alex. And I guess he's just not ready yet. But at some point, I guess anytime when people grieve, at some point, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that hopefully he'll see and he'll want to celebrate all this this greatness that we all see here, and hopefully he'll start releasing some of this stuff, a lot of it's easy stuff, just remastering stuff and like this, cleaning this video up and re-releasing it. And maybe, like you said, some outtakes or some bonus track or something like that on there of it. And I just, I think it's just inevitable. It will happen at some point, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, what we need to do between us as fans is we need to work out a hashtag Van Halen re-releases or something like that, or hashtag we demand VH remasters or something. There needs to be something like that we can share on social media that we can at least get something going. But look, I agree with you, John. I think we always have to be optimistic, don't we? And I suppose the frustrating point, and I'm repeating myself, I can go on Spotify every day and you can see an act over the last 40, 50 years that's remastered something, that's
Yeah.
re-released something, John, that's included. Gosh, even the Beatles did it a couple of weeks back, with Revolver. They got Giles Martin, and he's done that three or four other albums,
Right.
of the Beatles. So he's remastered it, outtakes. They put it together in a package, and those packages, John, range from $600 to $40.
Right.
To
You're
nothing if you stream it on your device. So,
well, you know what, Andrew, I had a lot of hope last year, just from that one picture we saw with Alex and Don Landy. They were at a studio checking out Dolby Atmos. So I still have hope that something's, something good's going to happen, that Don is going to get involved in, some stuff there, and hopefully, we'll see something. Because that, Irving Azoff, I'm sure if he's involved in there, he's just waiting for Alex to give the thumbs up to whatever. And I'm sure Warner Brothers, if they have control of any of the remasters and stuff, that, I'm sure they're ready to go. It's just that, Alex has got to say yes, you know what I mean? So hopefully it gets to that point, pretty soon, so we can kind of celebrate this stuff and, and carry it on.
I'm just going to write this down now. I think that's a perfect hashtag. I'm going to put that as a banner. The 50. Hold on for a second, brother. VAU out. So that is going to be. Did I spell everything right? Release the 5150 volt. Is it spelled right? Correct?
That's it.
Okay. All right. So that is going to be our hashtag, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to hashtag the heck out of that. Thank you, Keith. I'm going to just give me a second. How do I do this? I want to edit that. I'm going to edit that so I can put that. That is brilliant. What do you think about that? We've done well. See what happens when people get together? See what happens when you get together and you hang out? That is going to be the hashtag. Go crazy, everybody. Everything that you do now that you attach with Van Halen, we're going to put that on there. I promise, Keith, that we'll do that on every video that we do. Fantastic.
Definitely.
I'm going to say thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. We do look forward to catching up with you guys later. If you want to come back, I'm going to be here with the Rock Professor and Carl going through Rolling Stones album, the first 7 songs stripped. Brad can't be with us, so that's why Carl is doing this. Brad is out of state playing. This is a busy time of year, obviously, for a lot of musicians, and that's why Hoss obviously can't be here with us, because he's out of state. So you had to put up with John and I, and I hope that I hope that we kept everybody a little bit
awake,
entertained.
awake.
But it's always a pleasure, John, hanging out with you. And one other special shout out before I pass it on to John to say goodbye, to our brother Jimmy V, who's playing tonight. Go for it, brother. I love Jimmy's love for this band. Every time the guy talks about this band or music, can't you hear it in his voice, John? The guy's just
absolutely
just on fire for music.
It's infectious. It is. It's infectious.
Good show. Thank you, Joe. You guys are awesome. I'm out of here. John's going to say the last words, and we'll catch you guys later. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Glad to see everybody. Glad to be back talking some Van Halen, and look forward to doing it again soon. And the reason I have blood all over my nose is because my daughter's pit bull bit me like 2 hours ago. And it won't stop bleeding. So that's not from the surgery. That's the pit bull didn't like my nose. So anyway, that's it. I'm looking at them. I'm looking at myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's bad.
All
Anyway.
right. We're going to play the outro music for a little while, and we're going to flick through a couple of background screens because I still haven't re-edited the video. I promise I'll do it during Christmas break. I promise I will. Bye-bye, everybody.